In the 1950s, America had broken free from the shackles of wartime economics. It was walking with the swagger of a nation that had the world by the tail. Scientists had harnessed nuclear energy. Jet-propelled airplanes were breaking speed records. And the race to space was on. But perhaps more than anything else, one thing melded imagination and consumerism, putting this era in perfect context: the concept car. Unlike satellites, rockets, and jet planes, these dream cars were accessible. People flocked to auto shows, like GM's Motorama, to see the concept cars in their titanium-bodied glory. They were snapshots of how America perceived its future. They were simply out of sight. But what happened to them? Most were destroyed. Some just plain vanished. But amazingly, some are still here.
The Wildcat II was designed as a concept car, a dream car. This was in response to Chevrolet's development of the Corvette. It's about looks, it's about speed. The cool factor was so important, it just made you want to go, wow.
I think this is probably the most unique concept car of all time. It's the first concept car, and it doesn't take long to see a car from this period of time and then see the Y job to see how advanced it was. This car was a good 10 years advanced over and above what was being built in 1938.
Reintroducing the 1954 Buick Wildcat II and the 1938 Buick Y-Job. In 1954, a company called Burger King is founded, sparking a never-ending battle for market share in the fast food industry. The very first issue of Sports Illustrated magazine is published, helping to fuel an explosion in the popularity of spectator sports. In America, the spirit of competition is alive and well, and the automotive industry is right in step. This is the 1954 Buick Wildcat II.
General Motors had established styling as a priority. It was a marketing tool in particular. You could sell more cars if you kept changing them. And it also got people excited about their cars. That was the major point of it. This was in response to Chevrolet's development of the Corvette. This looks very much like a Corvette. It's small, fiberglass bodied. So this was sort of Buick's answer to it, to have something to sell to a younger market that was interested in a really fast car.
Buick and Chevrolet were both divisions of General Motors, but that didn't rule out a little healthy competition around the office.
This was about creating really cool cars, and they did. In the 50s and 60s, some of the most stylish cars around were Buicks. They wanted to sell to people who really like good-looking cars. It's about looks, it's about speed, it's about, again, the cool factor was so important with concept cars. It just made you want to go, wow.
The 1950s saw the emergence of the aeronautical design craze. Ultra-modern dream machines dominated the auto show circuit. But the 1954 Buick Wildcat II was different. It was more beast than rocket. It was sporty and aggressive. It stood out from the crowd, and it even stood out from its predecessor.
The Wildcat 1, it's a much longer car, it's lower, it's not a sporty model. It's a bit more space age than this is. This is very much a cat, is the way I think of it, and it is a Wildcat, but it's got the grace, it's got the look of it.
This concept car was all about image. Buick wanted to keep pace with the explosive popularity of the Corvette. The sporty Wildcat II had some similarities, but many of its design cues were all its own.
The 1954 Buick Wildcat II was stylistically very impressive. With its unique front-end design, very aggressive, with its bullet bumpers, and it's based off a Corvette platform from 1953, but it's definitely got a Wildcat look. Some new mold processes for 54 was something they were able to achieve with a better finish inside the mold to eliminate some of the fiberglass matte readout that you were seeing in the Corvettes in 53. So they were able to achieve a much nicer finish in 54. The open wheel well design is very unique for Wildcat. Stylistically very aggressive, open wheel design, allowed for plenty of airflow. Stainless steel wheel well inserts, polished stainless with the louvered vents for air cooling. Very nice, very cool car. With its full array of gauges, its custom-built dash, the wraparound windshield with a very high rake, much higher than what the Corvette had, very sleek and fast look. The rear of the 54 Wildcat II, although similar lines to the Corvette in 53, had a very chiseled, unique design to the Wildcat II, very aggressive with a recessed tail lamp pocket, these 3 inlaid marker lights flush in the panel, which were also carryover on the 54 Skylark. The rear panel has through exhaust, as well as the really cool thing about this car is you could pull up to the fuel pump either side and fill the vehicle with the push of a button, and you could fuel it from either side.
This concept car may have been a sexy beast, but it wasn't destined to pounce onto the assembly line. Unfortunately, the Buick Wildcat II would never see the long mass production run of its hugely popularized cousin. Years later, the Wildcat moniker would reappear on the production version of the 1963 Buick Wildcat, but the resemblance was in name only.
The 1963 mass-produced Wildcat looked nothing like this car. It was a production car. It couldn't use these radically designed fenders. You needed some kind of top on the car, which you did not have on this one. So again, what was needed was a car that could actually be driven on the road, that had issues, that covered issues of practicality and safety.
The 1954 Buick Wildcat II kept the spirit of competition alive at GM, but not all concept cars were kept alive themselves.
Essentially, with concept cars, it was a marketing tool. Once its marketing utility went away, what was the point in keeping it? They were on to the next product, the next concept car. I imagine any designer who worked on a car like this and put so much of their effort and their aesthetics into it must have been bothered by it, but again, they knew what the deal was. Oh, we've done that, been there, done that, let's try the next step. So they were so future focused.
For some concept cars, the golden era of automotive design was a cruel world. Beautiful works of art routinely went from the spotlight to the junkyard. Luckily, the 1954 Buick Wildcat II was spared this fate. It now resides in the protective care of the Alfred P. Sloan Museum's Buick Automotive Gallery in Flint, Michigan.
The 54 Wildcat was taken across the country in the Motorama shows. After that, it was pretty much stored away, and it was very lucky not to have been crushed or destroyed in some way. Someone at General Motors cherished it enough to make sure that it was given to our collections. It's the luck of the draw. It's fate. Most younger people, when they see the Wildcat 2, are surprised. They're used to a time when Buick design has been rather stodgy and meant for older people. They're amazed at it, so hopefully this will make people rethink their views of Buick. I prefer this design to that of the Corvette. This has a bit more elegance and it's stylistically much more interesting. Personal opinion.
In 1938, more than a decade before the golden era of concept cars, legendary GM designer Harley Earl gives the automotive world a sneak peek into the future of design.
The Y-Job was a large departure from standard automotive design. It was longer, leaner, lower to the ground. And with the advent of better roads, smaller wheels were now possible. Harley Earl was a visionary with almost a crystal ball-like capability. He could see into the future and knew what was going to be popular 10 or so years down the road.
1938. In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia's first commercial oil field is discovered. In America, the Great Depression is nearing its end, and automobile traffic is increasing. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt decides to study a national plan that would eventually become the U.S. interstate highway system. These events would spark a decades-long chain reaction that would forever reshape the face of automobile travel in America. That very same year, General Motors heralds the golden era of concept cars by designing its very first one. This is the 1938 Buick Y-Job.
I think this is probably the most unique concept car of all time. Even though it's the first concept car, it's probably the most unique as far as really stepping outside the box to do something that was so different in that period of time.
In the late 1930s, the quality of American roadways was improving, and it was time for the cars that drove on them to get with the times. In response, GM designer Harley Earl put pen to paper and crafted a vehicle that was truly revolutionary.
When Harley Earl came to General Motors in 1927, he opened the Art and Color section, which was the only dedicated design studio in the automobile business, period. The Y-Job was the first of these automobiles to be built as concept vehicles. It was done to measure the impact of some of these wild, crazy ideas from not only from design but also from technology. When you look at this first concept vehicle, it's a very low and sleek automobile. When you look at the cars that were being mass produced during 1938, you can notice that they're very tall, very bulbous in design, not very sleek. The roads were so bad prior to Harley Earl's time that you needed high ground clearance and lots of tire. With the advent of better roads in the United States, it was no longer necessary to have the tall ground clearance or the large wheels and tires that you needed before to traverse the bad roads.
The name Y-Job was inspired by the aircraft industry, which used the Y designation for its most advanced work. Unlike the dream cars of the 1950s, this concept car didn't have a bubble-top canopy, or giant fins, or a turbine engine. Even so, this car's uniqueness was in a stratosphere all its own.
The Y-Job was a large departure from standard automotive design. It was longer, leaner, lower to the ground. And with the advent of better roads, smaller wheels were now possible. And it doesn't take long to see a car from this period of time and then see the Y-Job to see how advanced it was. This car was a good 10 years advanced over and above what was being built in 1938. During this time frame, Art Deco was very popular. You can see certain hints and cues of the Art Deco age in the 38 Buick Y-Job. a lot of things were starting to be designed. It just wasn't good enough to make a jewelry box out of a box. It had to be designed, it had to have flowing design. And that carried through to almost all items that were produced from toasters to automobiles. Unlike the rest of the concept vehicles that Harley built over the years, the Y-Job rests on a standard 1938 Buick frame. The rest of the car is all hand-built. It has some very, very unique features such as hideaway headlamps. Another distinctive feature of the Buick Y-Job is the gun sight style hood ornament. This gun sight style hood ornament was so popular that it appeared on Buicks for decades. Another distinctive feature of the Buick is the familiar Buick grille, which also appears on Buicks even today. Coming around the side of the Buick Y-Job, you see a very unique wraparound front bumper, very unique hubcap with gas turbine ring and flipper style hubcap, wind splinted pontoon style fender with extension for the first time going into the door, an almost flush mounted push button door handle, as well as wind splinted pontoon style rear fender pods. As you walk rearward on the Buick Y-Job, you notice the graceful line of the rear bumper follows the graceful lines of the rear quarter. Notice the simulated exhaust port on the tail of the Y-Job, culminating into a boat tail style rear end treatment. This truly makes this a classic concept car. The 38 Y-Job is very Art Deco on the interior, very similar to Art Deco trends of the day with the dashboard and the materials, culminating into the signature of Harley Earl, the embedded St. Christopher's medal in the center of the horn button.
This concept car was anything but humble. But for Harley Earl, the 1938 Buick Y-Job represented humble beginnings. This would be the first in a seemingly endless assembly line of spectacular conceptual design ideas, all under the watch of one man. But where did all these ideas come from? How did one of the most legendary and influential automotive designers of all time come to be? The 1938 Buick Y-Job was GM's very first concept car. It was also one of the most significant creations in the history of automotive design. Its design was truly groundbreaking, but the real reason for its legendary status is the legend that created it, his leadership and his rich creative background.
Harley Earl was doing cars for the movie stars out in California. He was spotted by General Motors, by one of the Fisher brothers, brought into Cadillac to head up the design of the new LaSalle for 1927. They were so pleased with what he had done with the LaSalle that they made him head of his own design studio, which was called Art and Color. Art and Color was the first dedicated design studio in the whole automobile industry. Harley Earl was also the first to bring clay modeling into the industry. When Harley Earl brought these cars together, the design cues on these cars were so harmonious, almost a crystal ball-like capability. He could see into the future and knew what was going to be popular 10 or so years down the road.
During the 1950s, Harley Earl promoted his outrageously futuristic concept cars at hugely popular auto shows like GM's Motorama. But there was no such platform for the Buick Y-Job, so Earl promoted his very first dream car the old-fashioned way. He took it cruising.
It was an early form of market testing. Harley Earl would usually pull into a parking lot and gauge the reaction of the crowd that would gather around this very unique car. There was a very strong reaction to it. It was unlike anything else that anybody had ever seen, so it was more form and function than anything else. This car is longer, lower, and sleeker than any of the cars that were being built at that time, and people recognized that.
Harley Earl's market research may have been grassroots, and it was effective. But was there enough positive response for GM to consider the mass production of their very first concept car?
Mass producing a car like this would have most certainly been tough at the time. Anytime you do something that is so radically different, it's not readily acceptable by everybody. I think it took a while for Harley to convince everybody that this was the way of the future. But if you look at the cars going forward from 1938, you start to see a lot of the styling features that you see. The long, low, sleek look, as well as the form of aircraft-inspired design. A lot of the design cues on this car certainly made it into future cars. The familiar Buick bomb sight hood ornament. Even the shape of the grille is very familiar to the Buicks, not only from the 40s and 50s, but also even on some of the Buicks that we're producing today have that familiar Buick look.
In the world of concept cars, not every one-off creation lives to see the modern world. But the Buick Wildcat was different. It was preserved. This car has been in and out of museums and storage over the last 60 years, but it's never been out of the protective hands of General Motors.
Being that it is the very first concept car of all time, it would be sacrilegious to destroy this car. This car will be preserved as long as man is alive. I can never see that this car will ever go away. It'll be an example of how cars were designed and how the birth of design came about for automobiles for all time. I think that once they found out the importance of doing concept vehicles and being able to judge the marketing value of a design, this car quickly became priceless as an example of how to do that. Today, absolutely, this car is totally priceless in my opinion. It'd be very tough to reproduce in any way, shape, or form if anything happened to it. So we are very ginger with this car. We really pick and choose how this car is used just because it is a work of art and it is a national treasure in America. I don't think people, when they first see the car, are aware of the significance. But once you explain the car to them, there's a huge curiosity about this car. People want to know more about it. It's probably one of the few cars within the corporation that is constantly reviewed for what it means to General Motors and what it means to the automobile business. As far as America is concerned, this car would be considered a national treasure as far as automotive artifacts go.